How's it going, guys? Today we are going to be talking about the CorePhone Regular Edition. Now, there was the CorePhone E that I sort of showed you a little while ago, and now I am showing you the CorePhone Regular Edition. There was also the Master Edition, but that one was the actually only CorePhone in the world that was actually sold. So this is the Regular Edition, and we are going to be doing a review of that right now. Honestly, this is a phone that I actually really like and would have preferred to be the CorePhone E or just have the CorePhone E not exist. I think I spent way too much money on the CorePhone E and I should have invested more on this phone because this phone was actually really good. For starters, let's just talk about the display. The display is a 1280 by 600 display, which obviously isn't as good as the CorePhone E, but it is actually still really good and you generally cannot see really pixels at all. It looks really good, and this is also a really bright display. It's very similar in brightness to the CorePhone E, or maybe even a little bit more brighter than that. Now this, I believe, is at full brightness. Yeah, it's at full brightness, and as you can see, it's doing totally fine. Obviously, it's pretty cloudy out, but it is actually doing pretty well. Another thing to note that was kind of special, especially for this price that I was putting it at, is that this has a 75 hertz display. Now, it doesn't always stay at 75 hertz, I will admit, just because of the processor, which I will talk about later. But the 75 hertz you can definitely tell and is actually playable in some games. So let's talk about that processor. It's a MediaTek 6739, which is actually pretty good and a lot better than something like the CorePhone E, which was a MediaTek 6580. This was a lot better. This also had 3 gigabytes of RAM, which was plenty better and was great for, opening up apps, games, etc. And also had 32 gigabytes of storage, which was also a lot more than the CorePhone E. So let's do a little bit of a performance test right now. What we're going to do is that we're going to open up Slope. So this is a game that is pretty popular. It's a 3D title actually, so we'll see how well this handles. So as you can see, it's loading here, already loaded up, and we are going to play. As you can see, it's pretty good. I actually completely forgot how to play this game. But you can see it's totally working. And even though I'm terrible at this game, it is running at a solid, I'm not sure how much FPS, but it is running a very solid FPS, whatever it is. So yeah, I just turned it right there, so that's why it lagged a little bit, but overall, it's pretty good. So let's do another app right here. This is state.io. This is actually a pretty fun game. I highly recommend it. I just discovered it recently, and honestly, this is a really fun game, so yeah, I highly recommend it. So let's see how this performs. Okay, so as you can see, it's loading right here. And actually, let's turn up the sound so you can see how good the speakers are. I will say the speakers are only coming from one position, which is over here, but still, it's pretty good. Now, let's play right here. This is playing pretty well so far. I'm not seeing any really lag or anything. Obviously, this is a very unintensive game, but it's pretty good so far. Not seeing any problems here. So yeah, you can see it's running totally fine. I would say maybe there's a few frame drops, but overall, it's pretty good. Also about the speaker quality, it's pretty good, even though it's only a bottom-facing speaker. I will say it is very comparable to other bottom-facing speakers that are higher end. So yeah. Now it did just start raining, but we're just gonna do a camera test right now. Well, actually, before I do that, I'm gonna talk about some of these cameras. So what we have here is a 13 megapixel camera. And then down here, we have an extra depth camera. And then up here, what we have is we have an 8 megapixel front-facing camera, which is actually pretty good, especially for this price point. So let's check these cameras out. This is a 1080p 30 FPS video test on the CorePhone Regular Edition. So yeah, it's 30 FPS and it's pretty stable right now. There is autofocus and auto exposure, and there's also EIS on. And I will say it is pretty good. There is a few frame drops, but here, let's go on a focusing right here. And as you can see, it focuses very fast. The colors are alright. Now this is just on the default camera app that we have right here. However, I also have Camera Go installed on here, and we'll do a video test on that after, or maybe I'll do a separate video on it. Here we go. As you can see, it's pretty good exposure. It has a really good depth of field. So, as you can see right there. And yeah, it is raining, so obviously it won't look as good as something that, you know, in pure daylight, but it does overall look pretty great. And it is focusing really well, as you can see, and focuses right back on. Obviously, it's not going to be as good as something like super high-end camera, but you can see the sky has a decent amount of detail because it's 13 megapixels and not something like lower, like 5 on the CorePhone E. Let's do a little bit of a stability test here, so let's walk over here. Generally, it's pretty stable. Obviously, there's a little bit of jitters, but generally, it's good. This is a 720p video test on the front-facing camera. Obviously, not amazing that it is 720p. Nevertheless, though, it does actually have a little bit of a background blur, as you can see. And the overall quality is pretty good. It exposes my face decently well. Obviously, not amazing when I go like that, but here we go. It doesn't overexpose my face either. Doesn't have the most amazing colors for sure, but it doesn't have the worst either. And considering this price point, it's not too shabby, so yeah. This is a 1080p 30 FPS video test on the Google's Camera Go, and honestly, I will say it does a lot better job in some areas and does a little bit of worse job in other areas. I will say sometimes with this it does feel a little bit more stable in terms of the FPS and actually when walking around. So I think it uses the EIS a decent amount better, as you can see right there. The exposure, though, is generally the same, and the focusing is generally the same. So there's a few other things that I want to note. So first of all, about the camera quality, it's pretty good. Obviously, there's a few problems with it. It's not the best. And also, I would say the exposure, while sometimes good, is also sometimes not great. But the detail overall is good, and the colors are fine, even though, you know, it is pretty gloomy today, guys. So, yeah. But overall, it's pretty great. Now, one thing that's pretty awesome besides the camera is there's here we go, fingerprint unlock, and there's also face unlock. So you both have fingerprint and face unlock, which is kind of a rare thing to see on budget phones. Usually there's either face unlock or fingerprint unlock, but both is pretty awesome. Another thing is that the battery is generally pretty good for a budget phone. And usually I can get 5 to 6 hours of screen on time. And if I'm using it heavily, still like 4 hours. So not too bad on that front either. So overall, it's sometimes hard to give your own phone a rating, which I don't think too many people can relate on that, but but overall, I actually like this phone a lot more than the other phones that I created. This phone has a lot of things that, in my opinion, are going for it. For instance, the 75 hertz display, one that is pretty bright and you can actually see in pure daylight, as well as a pretty good camera system and a pretty cheap price point that I put. At the time I put it, I believe for $159, which was exactly where the CorePhone E was. And in my opinion, this is a decent amount better than the CorePhone E. And so if I would have to give my own phone a rating, I would actually give this probably like a 8 out of 10, a 9 out of 10, or like a 4 out of 5 or something like that. honestly, compared to the competition, it, in my opinion, holds up. Obviously, other people can have different opinions. And yes, even though there are a decent amount of problems with this, it does have some really good things going for it. So anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you guys enjoyed my take on my own phone. And I know that I'm a bit biased, but I try to be as unbiased as possible with my own phones. Obviously, you can technically purchase it, I believe on eBay. If you're curious about that, I'm sure I can send you a link somewhere. But honestly, I really do enjoy the phone that I made right here. And I intend on using it occasionally, from time to time.